I'm so excited you decided to be a part of the Story of Us Life Group Study. This study is designed so that you can go through it on your own, but it's best done by gathering with a group of friends over the next 6 weeks. If you know someone who you really want to connect with, then be sure to invite them to come join you for next week's session. Make the most of this time by deciding to connect with God deeper and connect with others better. There's also a few things you as a group need to decide as you get started. Decide with your group today where you'll meet, if you'll do the study around the dinner table or at a coffee shop. Decide today what time works best for you to meet, the evening, the morning, or at lunchtime. Decide today what day of the week works best for all of you and whether or not you want to separate into smaller groups during the discussion questions. These are important decisions, and it's best to make them now if you haven't already. It's our desire that as you journey through the Story of Us Life Group Study, you will see your story within the story of the early followers of Jesus. These followers were so moved by God that they made a dramatic difference in so many of the people they encountered in those days. And we want to see you make such a difference in the lives of those you encounter in your day. So please let God move in your heart like He did in those first days of the church. I think at some point in every human being's life, they imagine making a difference in this world. We want to invent something groundbreaking. We want to discover something new. We want to inspire, to challenge, and to change things for the better. Imagine that you want to make such an impact that with what you did would last for generation after generation and after generation. An impact that would grow over time rather than diminish. Jesus made this kind of impact on the earth during His 3.5 years of public ministry. And when it was all said and done, the Son of God had created something very special. This was not the first time Jesus had a hand in creating something special either. At the beginning of all creation, Jesus was there. We're told in John 1:3 that everything was created through Him and nothing was created except through Him. But even this new creation Jesus had made around 30 AD was unlike anything He had created before it. And what was it that Jesus had created? The church. That's right. The church is grander than the view from the top of Mount Everest and filled with more beauty and colors than the Great Barrier Reef. The church is more wondrous than the Grand Canyon and more exhilarating than an African savanna safari. And how can I even say this? How do I know this to be true? Because the church is us. The church is made up of more people groups than any one continent could hold. The church is filled with languages of all nations, tribes, and peoples. The church has lasted longer than the greatest empires, and the church is still the greatest change agent in our world today. Because the church is us. Yes, the church has taken its own share of lumps and bruises. It has had its good days and bad. There are times the church has walked through history with such beauty and grace, while other times the church has simply made an ugly mess. And do you know why it has done all of that and more? Because the church is us. The church is flawed because we are flawed. The church is glorious because we are glorious. The church is the greatest creation of God because the church is us. This 6-week life group study will take you and me on an adventure to discover what makes the church, what makes us, the greatest thing Jesus ever created. We will look at the early church days and how a group of no larger than 10 dozen were empowered by the Holy Spirit and bonded together like no one had ever seen a group bonded before. We will see things that not only were unheard of in that day, but are even more unlikely in our day. We'll see how one man who couldn't stand up to a little girl while Jesus was on the earth would stand up to the greatest religious minds of his day after Jesus left the earth. We'll see how the greatest enemy of the church became the church's greatest ally and loudest voice. We'll see how it was the church that was breaking barriers between cultures, peoples, and races, and should still be doing the same today. We'll see that the church became its most effective when it was forced to move beyond its comfort zones and boldly go with, boldly stand for, and boldly share the message of Jesus, the gospel message. This is the story of the church. This is the story of us. This story of us is captured in the New Testament historical book called the Acts of the Apostles, or just the book of Acts. It starts where Jesus' time on earth ends. And you see, after Jesus' resurrection and numerous encounters with his followers, he gathered his most trusted and faithful disciples, known as the apostles, and gave them some final instructions. And after he finished speaking to them, he was lifted up into the air and into the clouds out of sight of his men. Jesus was gone, but when Jesus left the earth, he left a part of himself on earth. He left us. The Gospels are the story of Jesus, while the book of Acts is the story of the church. And just like our story follows the story of Jesus, so we must live the same way. We are to follow Jesus' words and his ways. The book of Acts is how this journey began for the church, how the story of us began. Today we want you to take some time to go through the discussion questions talking about your journey through church. Share your good stories and your bad. Share your highlights and lowlights. Share how the church has been there for you and how the church has left you abandoned and alone. I pray you have a wondrous, eye-opening, and heart-gripping time together, sharing your stories with one another. And remember, as you share about the church, you are not just telling your story, you are telling our story, because we are the church. The story of the church is really the story of us.